Yeah, g'day folks, you're back once again with the big fella. Good to have you back with us. Sydney hasn't actually calmed down all that much ever since this coronavirus outbreak. I mean, just look. Still got normal traffic. Everything kind of seems normal on the surface. I hope you're practicing your social distancing and washing your hands 50 million times a day, and don't forget your toilet roll. Anyway, it's late March now, and it won't be too long before I head back up north to get together with the family and have a bit of a quiet Easter and leave Sydney behind. I wish I could say that permanently, but all I know is my heart belongs up north. This year, 2020, Easter isn't too far away, so it's going to be towards the middle of April. And I've made a bit of a list, a top 10, to minimise the risk of COVID-19 exposure. Alright, so here's a hypothetical question for you. Why, if you lived in Sydney, would you want to escape over the Easter break? Well, quite simply, do you have any reason to escape Sydney over the Easter break? If not, then you'd probably want to stay sitting stir crazy in your place while enjoying this pandemic of coronavirus. It's up to you. But for myself, I would prefer to get out of Sydney and go and visit family who live abroad, specifically up north on the northern rivers of New South Wales. Hygiene, okay, always wash your hands before you eat, after you go to the loo, any time that you feel is necessary. It is pretty simple stuff. Okay, now a wise man once told me about common sense being not so common these days, and I'll tell you what, he's damn right. Social distancing. Okay, now this is pretty much a global thing. Remember, with social distancing, for us here in Australia, it's a minimum of 1.5 meters between people. And they updated that recently with an indoor component to that rule as well. If it's 100 square meters, say for instance, it's going to be a minimum of 4 square meters between people, because indoors, air doesn't move around all that much. It's easier to contract germs, virus, etc., etc. So if you've got a 100 square metre place, you're only going to have 25 people within that area, within that room, that dwelling, whatever. All right, now the next one, fairly straightforward. Avoid crowded areas. Okay, if you're on the go, if you're travelling abroad, interstate, intrastate, across town, whatever, to go anywhere this Easter. If you have to go to a rest stop, say to go to the loo or something, okay, stretch your legs. If you've been driving for more than 2 hours, you're probably going to have other people to contend with as well if you're stopping at a rest area, say that's on the side of a highway. Try to avoid those crowds if you can. So again, minimum 1.5 meters between people. If you're driving anywhere, maintain rest breaks. So again, like I said before, minimum 2 hours if you're driving. If you're a passenger, whenever you need, just try and extend the time between rest breaks if you can. Try to minimize the time for rest breaks, typically probably about 10 minutes, just enough to get out, go to the loo, wash your hands, etc., etc. Walk around the car and jump back in the car and off you go. That's kind of what you want to do. Minimising exposure is what it's all about. So the next tip, if you're driving, inevitably if you've got to fill up on fuel, make sure to stay away from people with coughs. Again, social distancing being a prime concern. Minimal time to go in and pay at the counter. If possible, pay at the pump. Now, I know this is going to be a no-brainer for people like Americans. They've got to pay either at the pump or inside first, then fill up, and then make alterations to their payments after they've filled up. But Australia, it's a bit different. So you arrive, you pick up the nozzle, you put it in your fuel tank, you fill up, and then you pay inside. Or you pay via card before you start pumping, so you got your card information there. The amount that is billed to your card is applied after you've put the nozzle back on the bowser. So that's kind of how it works here in Australia. That's kind of a preferable thing if you're driving and you have to fill up on fuel. If you don't have to go inside, then don't. Next tip, again, if you're driving, make sure your car has been serviced before you go anywhere. It's a mandatory thing for people to maintain their cars before they go anywhere on the highway. So make sure you've got enough oil, make sure you've got water in your radiator. People with electric cars like a Tesla, I don't know how far you're going to get when you go from, say, here to the north coast, or going over to, say, Brisbane, which is nearly 1,200 k's away. But I suppose you'll probably fill up on electricity somewhere in a Tesla charging station, but yeah, that's another matter. I mean, there aren't too many of those on the road, and there aren't too many charging stations as it is, nowhere near as many as in America. Maintain the car, which brings me on to the next point, which is tyre pressures. Always have your car tyres inflated to the proper pressure, maybe a little bit over, not too much. Your tyre pressure specs should be on your tyres or on the placard for your individual cars. So cars, four-wheel drives, etc., whatever vehicle that you use to go on the highway. An essential one for people that are driving long distances, which is eating on the go. So many people will pull over somewhere at a fast food restaurant, say for instance, and they will want to go inside and order what they want, probably eat inside the restaurant, which will probably be a fairly big no-no in most cases. Especially around Australia. We're trying to minimise on the exposure of COVID-19, and basically what this means is there's going to be a lot of people that are going to go through drive-thrus instead. Now, I haven't gone through this myself, I haven't tested it out, I'm just going by purely a hypothesis. I can just imagine the queues of people that are going to be lining up, especially towards Easter break itself when people want to travel. The lines that are going to be happening outside of, say, McDonald's, KFC, anywhere else that has a drive-through, then yeah, it's going to be chaotic. So just be prepared for a long line, because that's kind of what you're going to face. It's going to be inevitable, I'm afraid. Other than that, prepare yourself some food before you go anywhere. That means you don't have to expose yourself to anyone else, anything else than you have to. Eat in the car or eat in an area that's going to be sparsely populated if you want to eat outdoors. Very simple, common sense stuff. And lastly, be safe. Okay, so if you're driving a car, don't speed, enjoy your Easter weekend. You want to get to both ends safely. Okay, so you want to get to a destination safely and you want to return safely. All right, so you don't want to become another statistic on the road. All right, that's the last thing we want. So me personally, I'll be heading up to the north coast. That's where my family lives, and I think I've done that trip probably close to 100 times, and to me it just feels like nothing. The first time I went up there, it felt like it took forever, but now the roadworks have mostly completed. I mean, it's taken only about 20 years to get most of the roadworks completed, but they're still putting in bypasses here and there, and yeah, eventually it will become a shorter trip, but as it is right now, it's well over 700 k's from here to there, one way. So basically I'll be following these tips myself, and just for common sense sake, it'd be good if you would too. There's my 10 tips for going away on an Easter break during this time of pandemic, and unfortunately it's just the way we have to deal with things. All I say is that we exercise a little bit more patience, a little bit more understanding, a bit more tolerance, and just remember to keep your distance from people. And I know it's going to be a very hard thing to do because we're so accustomed to being around masses of people at a time, and keeping it in the back of your head that we've got to be away from people to potentially reduce something that we can't even see. And that is the hardest thing. Just looking at the Regional Express website, which is the airline that most Australians would use between, say, New South Wales and Queensland or Victoria, any domestic travel. It is the largest regional transporter of people via air outside of Qantas. It's not showing me any restrictions or limitations on how many people they can actually take on a flight, which is the first thing I look for. It's just saying that they've upgraded their cleaning habits, their air filtration, their seating arrangements, etc., etc. Basically, everything that you come to expect about a responsible airline in a time of crisis like this is. So I'll leave a link for the Rex webpage regarding the coronavirus, and I would dare say that the other airlines that are going to have something very similar to this as well. Alright, so that's about it for now. The whole message behind this PSA, or public safety announcement, or public service announcement, whatever you want to call it, safety in this case, basically common sense, okay? Do whatever you need to keep yourself safe going from A to B and from B to C. And that includes everything that you do in the meantime, okay, in between trips. That top 10 that I've just listed there, those 10 tips, basically they're just standard common sense procedures that should become a secondary type of norm for you. Alright, so that's it for now, guys. I'll leave links in the description to all my social media outlets, and I just hope you guys don't go stir crazy with all the cabin fever that you got to endure while we're trying to avoid this pandemic. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all the usual stuff, okay? Thanks very much for watching once again. It's the big fella. Have a good one. Stay safe.